Welcome to the Fantasy and Frames. This is the Dynasty Evaluation Show. I'm John McGlynn. You can find me on the Dynasty Evaluation, the Commissioner Evaluation. My Dynasty Evaluation YouTube page is up and running now. Finally, after 4 years of doing fantasy football, I have a YouTube page. It's probably terrible, but it's starting somewhere. So, JT, thanks for joining us today, as usual. Absolutely. For the fourth show. This is hour 6, I think, now of talking fantasy football today. But we're used to talking long shows, so
we've been doing pretty well today, John. We've kind of kept every show to about an hour, so I've been pretty proud of us so far.
I'm pretty proud. Every show's usually 90 minutes minimum. This is it's kind of rare today. It's like Halloween or something. There's a black cat walk past us or something. made our shows short, but we'll take it. Dave Heilman, what's going on, man? What's going on? Thanks for joining us today. Where can everybody find you at? Tell me all about the what you do in the fantasy football world.
Yeah, so you can find me at Dynasty Dorks. It's one word. And I'm TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. And I right now work for SGPN Fantasy Football. It's for the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. And I also do some social media for DTC, Dynasty Trade Calculator. Just got back from the Combine, got to do some of the media sessions, and then got to see the on-field workouts. And super excited to talk about wide receivers today.
Super jealous you guys went to the Combine. I've seen everybody there taking pictures and interviewing people and having a great time, drinking beers, staying at their hotel, talking to future NFL players. And I was at work working midnights. It was terrible. I was like, you son of a bitches, but whatever. It is what it is. I'll see you guys in Canton, Ohio for the Expo. That's what it's all about, I guess. Having a good time no matter what we do. But so today we talked this morning. We started off talking about quarterbacks. We had running backs, then we talked tight ends, and now we are here talking wide receivers, which it might work out great that it worked out this way because this might be a little bit longer show than we've had. Hopefully we'll try to keep it to an hour, but there's a lot to talk about here. The deepest by far of all the positions this year. There's unlike last year where we had the 5'2", 135-pound small receivers. It's like the Army's coming in. It's like this is what's going to replenish the receivers in the NFL. It's deep. It's great. This class is absolutely fantastic. So let us get to the questions here. So who do you think, Dave, I'll start with you. Who do you think handled themselves the best in the media day from all the wide receivers?
Yeah, there was a lot. Marvin Harrison Jr. obviously did not attend, so that was a little disappointing. But I loved the players talking about their teammates. I think you can see their personalities and a lot of their traits through that. A lot of them, like Xavier Leggett, was just gushing about Spencer Rattler, and them taking time from their media session to really, hype up their boys was cool. Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors, they're like, Jay Dale's number one quarterback in this class, and it's no question. Rome Odunze and all the guys from Washington were hyping up. But for me, Rome Odunze was a star. You can just tell some of these guys they just have the star power. They engage everyone. Very, very good at handling the press conferences, very mature. So Rome was definitely someone that stood out. Xavier Worthy, he not only crushed it on the field, but he had a great media session, just a great personality, funny guy, very polite, respectful. Same for AD Mitchell. You got McCaffrey as a quarterback, so he's got a little bit more experience than the other guys with this, and so I think he handled himself well, talking a lot about how his transition was, but. There's just so many guys. I'll give you a sleeper as far as, someone that really stood out was Bub Means from Pittsburgh. Just personality really, really stood out. And so he's someone I watched, and then he was awesome on the field.
Yeah, there was it was fun watching the other players asking McCaffrey if he was Christian McCaffrey's brother, or that stuff like that, the stuff that everybody like kind of frowns upon as fans, football analysts, not asking those questions. But this was the first time I saw the players actually have fun at the Combine. I don't remember a Combine being so much. There's always interactions and stuff, but they were being cool with each other. They were going like I don't want to say cross contaminating the position areas, but it was just funny seeing them all support. It was great seeing them all supporting each other. It was funny seeing them messing with each other, asking questions, joking around. Some of the being on the on-field stuff when Worthy broke the 40 time. It was cool seeing all these interactions. It had like a different vibe this year. And I wish I was there like you guys were, just to kind of see all the stuff happen. And you got to see Joel Milton throw the ball 40,000 yards too. So I'm super jealous about that also. But who, like we just talked about that, who ran the fastest 40 time? How cool was it sitting in the bleachers watching somebody break the record for the 40 time?
Yeah, so I've been to the combine before, not in the media, just going to the combine, and I think your comment earlier speaks to that. It was just like they would send you the guidelines and like no phones, no cheering. If you talk louder than a whisper, you're out of here. It was so serious. And I think on the field, it was a little bit more serious too. Last year, Anthony Richardson was like pumping up the crowd. Everybody was getting excited. And I'm like, dude, this guy's not making it out of Indy. Like, no way. Everybody's just drooling over him. And this year was the same way. And the players really were like cheering each other on. And the whole excitement with Worthy was, one, we didn't know if he was going to run again. Because I personally was like, this guy he doesn't need to. He just ran 4.25. Like, why does he even need to? Then, like, he's running again. We're like, oh, crap. Then he goes and false starts. And it's like drama is building. And when they run left to right and from where I was. And then you turn and you can see the big screen. And he knew because he just like, normally they loop around and go back. He went straight to the corner of the end zone and was pumping the crowd up. The poor camera guy, this old camera guy's trying to keep up with him. And then it says 4.22 on the screen. And it was the loudest that I've ever heard anything at the combine. And it was electric. It was an awesome moment. And JJ McCarthy, the quarterbacks, everybody was just so pumped. And I think, like you said, everybody was so all the position groups were cheering for each other. It was definitely just a lot of camaraderie, and it was really cool to see.
JT, was this your first combine?
This is the first one I've actually gone to in person. So I actually took the girlfriend and the son over. He did some of the reps and stuff outside. It was a good time, but we were actually sitting. We had went outside, kind of done some of the fan zone stuff, kind of in between sessions, and we had come back in, and we were sitting right where they're running the 40. I was in the end zone. Right off to the corner, so I could see him running right at us. And I already knew he was going to run a fast 40, and I told my son, I was like, watch this guy. He is super fast. And then he ran the 4.25. I was the same thing. I was like, he's not going to run it again. He just ran a 4.25. Like, he's just going to – but then the fact that he was pumped and wanted to run again and break the record, the fans were fired up. Like you said, it was everybody was fired up. It was like everyone stopped. It was like, here we go. And then he hit and he ran through and everybody just started cheering. He's running around. It was awesome. It was cool to see. It was the same kind of thing when Milton hit that 75-yard pass in the air. The fans were like, whoa. So it was pretty cool to see the fans get to cheer a little bit this year, because like you said, in the past, it seemed like they've been really on everybody about, be very quiet. Seemed very fan friendly this year. It was a good time. And yeah, fans got into it when they saw guys run good times, when they ran good gauntlets, saw nice passes. The fans cheered, and I think the players like that.
JT, we were at the Chicago Fishbowl draft together, all three of us, me, you, and Wendy early. And you guys are both there, and you didn't look for Wendy. What's going on, man? She's kind of a little bummed right now.
She's like, I saw it. I thought I saw you there. And I just totally, like I said, I was like, messing with my son doing something. I wasn't paying. I think I missed a bunch of people that I like half saw, and I was like, wait, was that? I think that was so-and-so. But it's funny because like we were in the hotel and I ran Bucky Brooks was there, and I was like, oh, he works at NFL Network, and I'm like pointing people out because my girlfriend and my son are like, who are any of these people? And I'm like pointing everybody out that works in fantasy and who they work for NFL. So it was pretty cool. Saw a lot of people walking around, but it was definitely. I mean, I know a lot of people can't make it to Indy, but it was a good time if you were in the area. It was fun.
I'm the guy that always walk up to somebody and say, are you so-and-so? I don't care. I don't get embarrassed like that. I'm like, are you so-and-so? Are you this and that? Like, I'd rather say hi and shake somebody's hand than be like, damn it, I had a chance to talk to, Dave Heilman, or I had a chance to talk to Justin Taylor. I had a chance to talk to Wendy Early. I don't get it. That's kind of stuff, man. I love shaking hands and kissing babies, kind of stuff like that. So that's, I love going to
Well,
stuff.
John, you're good at it. You're good at that. So that's how it works.
This is just a terrible year for me as far as these events go with my work. Guys having babies at work and shit like that. So just, man, it is what it is. But good for you guys. But back to the show sheet. So, who ran the slowest 40 out of these receivers that you can recall?
The slowest one was Isaiah Williams from Illinois, converted quarterback from East St. Louis, came to Illinois, was kind of supposed to be the savior at QB for them, eventually moved to wide receiver. He ran a 4.63. I was kind of wondering where he would be, as again, he's a fairly athletic guy, but he wasn't known as like over the top athletic quarterback coming out of high school. So I kind of wondered where he would fall in there. He ended up being the slowest. And the one I think that surprised a lot of people was Keon Coleman from Florida State. He ran a 4.61. And I think he's a taller guy. People kind of tout his athleticism. I think that was the one that surprised people a little bit, that he was at 4.61. But so many of these guys ran fast. A lot of guys were in the low 4.5s, a ton of 4.7s. And I was actually shocked at how many guys, I think it was like 10 plus were under like 4.4. So it was a fast group this year.
Yeah. Dave, how important is size? Like being a Tank Dell kind of guy, the Quentin Johnson type, like that debate. Is it important to be just is separation more important than 50-50 balls? Or what do you, when you talk about wide receivers, what is the most important attribute that you look for when you're scouting receivers?
Well, and I think if you've been doing this for a while, or you've been in fantasy football for a while, you kind of have this this prototype in your head. Everybody needs to look like Julio Jones. Everybody needs to look like AJ Green. And I think the last few years have taught us to kind of throw that away. And so I saw a great post, and the first thing that came out after he ran Worthy ran the 40 was, it's John Ross. He's off my board. And don't get me wrong, my initial knee-jerk reaction is like, oh man. And when I saw him like warming up and stretching out, I'm like, look at his legs. Like they were like just sticks. I mean, he's so thin. But I mean, I thought the same thing about Devonta Smith. He's pretty good. Tank Dell, he's pretty good. Josh Downs, Jordan Addison, pretty good. So don't just like take these guys off your board because they're small. At the end of the day, I'm going to take them off my board if they're small and they're just straight line speed guys. I'm not interested in, those kind of players. But if they can run routes, I'm interested. This is a different NFL. It's very pass heavy. Everybody's looking to get people in space. Everybody's looking to play for the speed game. You saw it last year. Tank Dell would have been off everyone's board 5-10 years ago. And he was a great pick, and people are dying to go grab him in their dynasty drafts. Don't go and fade Xavier Worthy because of your thought process, 10 years ago.
Yeah, Devonta Smith was the one that turned the corner for me as far as that goes. Yeah, 100%. So, JT, how important is size for you? Like, what do you look for? Dave just kind of like blueprinted what he looks at. Like, what do you think of? Are you still chasing the size guys? Are you chasing separation? What do you look for?
Yeah, it's hard not to love those guys that just had those physical freaks. Those guys are 6'3", 6'4", 220. I mean, you gotta love those guys. How do you hate on them? But I agree with Dave said. It's like the smaller guys. They can still play, and with the league has changed, so you don't have to have big guys. Now everybody still wants a big guy. If you can get a big guy who's also fast, that's where Brian Thomas comes in for me in this. So I like Brian Thomas a lot coming in. He was kind of in that second tier mix for me with guys. He solidified himself as wide receiver 4 for me. The 4.33 at over 200 plus pounds. I think he was 209 or 210. That's what he weighed in at. It's just crazy. Good size. Guy led the nation in touchdowns. To me, he jumped up to the very edge of that tier 1 as number 4 wide receiver for me. Plus, like Dave said earlier, Roma Dunze, he was a guy, everybody was always talking about. Everybody pretty much had him as wide receiver 3. He really impressed me. He really, really impressed me with everything he did going out there competing. I had a little bit of space between him and Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors. I think he really closed that gap for people. I think people think he is right there with those two guys now. And I think Brian Thomas, for me, just with the size, combo, speed, everything, he really moved up to number 4 for me. There's some smaller guys I like in this class. There's some bigger guys I still like too. But Brian Thomas, to me, was the big one because of the size and everything else with it. And I think he has room to grow. He kind of moved up. And if we're going to go with a small guy that I really was impressed with, because the guy I liked in college, but people were really iffy on him, was Jake Cowing from Arizona, former USC wide receiver. People were like, hey, he's good, but does he do anything great? Can he make it at the NFL level? He's kind of projected more as a slot guy. He came out, ran a 4.38. I was like, wowed. I thought he might run in like the 4.55s. And the fact that he ran the 4.38 as a slot receiver, which I actually like his game, I think he translates fairly well to the NFL if he gets on the right team. So that was a big one for me. He's the guy I saw early in the draft process where people were like mocking him, like, fantasy wise in the mid second, early second. Then all of a sudden I'm seeing him going in the 4th rounds. Now I think he's going to creep back up. I think he's a guy that could go in the 3rd or 4th round of the NFL draft. But I like what I saw to him too.
He had almost like a 40% target share at Arizona. It was crazy. Like, I know they didn't throw the ball,
and they had a lot of other good wide receivers too. I mean, they got Ted McMillan, who is going to be pushing to be the top wide receiver in the draft next year. So it's not like he was all by himself. I just think I like Cowan a lot, but I'm going to let Dave jump back in here, but there's just so many wideouts I want to talk about because I love so many guys in this group. And I thought a ton of them really showed out at the combine.
But last thing real fast. Let's just say we're going to go in imagination world here. Okay. Let's just say that the MVS replacement in Kansas City. All right. This year, it will be God damn it! Let's just say if we get if Brian Thomas goes to Kansas City and he replaces MVS, like where does it? Is he number 2 in his draft?
Oh, he's
number 4.
Well, he'll jump up. I don't think he gets to Kansas City. I know. I really think he ends up going top 20 after that performance. I had a lot of people. I saw people looking, maybe he goes if the Bengals don't keep Higgins. I've seen Jags. I think Jags is a really good spot. I did a show the other day where somebody brought up the Saints at 14. I was like, oh, I kind of actually like that, him being opposite Olave. If the Colts, I don't think they'll go wide receiver. I think they maybe go Bowers. But if they did go wide receiver, I could see them going for someone like Brian Thomas with just a crazy RAS score and how they love that. I could see them going with him at 15. But I definitely think he's going to be in that top 20 range. And I wouldn't be surprised if somebody moves up to grab him.
Go ahead. Let you chime in there, Dave.
Yeah, like you said there about the RAS score. Dan Jeremiah was joking around with Ballard about he just likes athletic freaks. And so anybody that has huge combine numbers, I know that they're in Indianapolis, so they got a nice look at these guys, but they typically like to keep them in Indy. And so they had an extremely athletic draft last year where everybody had a 9.90 or higher RAS score. Teams have types. And when you look at, how if the GM is the same GM as last year and the year before, you can kind of know what their types are and what they're looking for. And good teams typically have some type of recipe and the common ingredients that they like. And, the culture, one of them. For me, I'm not a Derek Carr guy. So Brian Thomas there, I'd rather him go to the Jags. I hope someone trades up and gets him. I don't think Calvin Ridley ends up back in Jacksonville. Imagine Brian Thomas over with the Bills. Oh, that would be so nice.
Yeah. I love the Bills and Jags. I think those are two great landing spots. I'd love to see them,
especially for Trevor Lawrence. I mean, I feel like Trevor Lawrence needs a little bit more help than Buffalo than Josh Allen does. Josh Allen just makes things happen. Where Lawrence I don't think the team was good around him as it is in Buffalo.
Yeah, and so one comment on Brian Thomas. And this is something if you want to be really good at Dynasty, I think it's important that you know football. And so don't just listen to a Dynasty podcast, listen to football podcasts too. And one thing that Move the Sticks talked about with Brian Thomas is you look at it and you see the contested catches. And one argument is wow, this guy's a contested catch freak. There's not a 50-50 ball. It's more like a 70-30 ball. and he's going to grab it. And then there's other people going, well, maybe he can't separate. Well, no, like they throw back shoulder fades to him like 5 times a game, and that's their game. So it's going to skew those numbers. And so, I definitely am not here to bash the analytics guys. I think there's a lot of great analytics that can help you determine success and predict success, but don't forget about the tape. And if you marry them together, I think you can do a proper evaluation. And with Brian Thomas, that's a guy where, like, if you see that, you're like, oh, this guy can't separate. It's N'Keal Harry, blah, blah, blah. This guy can separate. This guy can play. And you saw it every single week down in LSU.
Yeah, over 50% target share. I mean, over 50%, 50-50 ball rate. So it's pretty good, man. It's a dominant receiver.
Yeah, he's my number 4 as well.
Yeah, that's who benefited the most by being an early declare, and who benefited the most by staying in school for a year, like seasoning themselves for the class this year. Dave, I'll start with you.
I didn't really think about that question. So for me, I'm just going to stick with the top guys. I mean, it's a different world with the NIL and things like that. And so there's some other aspects to this.
Sure.
And so as far as in particular players, I don't really have any, but you look at the guys that are in the top of the class that were able to declare early. They jumped in on a really heavy class, knowing that they were going to be the top guys. And so I like to see that. I like to see that confidence. And you always want to see early breakouts in your dynasty players.
Yeah. JT, anybody you saw that it was a good idea for them to come in to either come in early declare, or guys who stuck in last year for next year of school and this year are reaping the benefits of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to look at a guy like Xavier Legette. I mean, he couldn't declare because he never played before. I mean, this year was his only year. You're going to have the guys that just don't like him because they hate the late breakout. They hate that he didn't do anything until his 5th year as a senior. But I thought he really did a nice job at the combine, showed his athleticism. 9.92 was number 3 among wide receivers, and RAS score ran a 4.39 40. I mean, just the fact that he kind of put it together 6'1", 220, and he's one of those guys you just looked at him and you're like, that guy is built. He is just built, man. The guy's just muscular. I think he's going to be a steal. I've seen him go all over the place. I think he could sneak into the 2nd round. I think he's maybe more of a 3rd round pick just because of the only 1-year breakout, but I think there's going to be some teams that say, hey, it's worth the shot. It's worth, looking at a guy this athletic with this ability, even if he only did have a 1-year breakout. The other guy I really liked that I thought the combine really showed what type of player he was Ladd McConkey. He was banged up. He didn't get a ton of target share at Georgia because they just wanted to run the ball and their defense was so awesome. So the question was like, is Ladd McConkey as good as people are saying he is? And every drill he went through, especially the gauntlet, I just was more impressed by him. He ran a nice 40 time. His hands looked nice. When he was running the gauntlet where they just chuck the ball at you and you're running full speed, he got up in that 18.5, 19 mile an hour range and never slowed down and just caught the ball and turned the corner. He looked very smooth for me. I liked him a lot. He definitely was one of the guys that moved up my board. I kind of had him on the back edge of that tier 2 wide receiver, and I think he kind of pushed himself up to the top end of tier 2 for me.
Yeah, Dave, how often do you think, how important do you think the RAS score, the relative athletic score is for wide receivers?
I mean, it's obviously a measurement that you're going to bake into your evaluation. There's guys that will test out test off the charts and not be great at football. But I think when you're looking at these guys, when you look at speed in particular, and then you look at weight adjusted speed, these guys are going to get good draft capital. The NFL loves speed. We saw Tutu Atwell go in the 2nd round. That's not saying a lot of great things about speed, but I'm telling you that a guy with speed is going to get drafted higher, which is going to give him more opportunities. And that's what you're looking for in the NFL. you get some of these guys that are great receivers in college, and you're like, wow, this guy's going to be awesome. Has a so-so combine that gets drafted in the 6th round, is 18th on the depth chart, and you're like, well, let's just hope it works out. When this other guy gets 2nd round draft capital, and the team has, they want to use him early.
Yeah, JT, which one of these RAS score heroes are or RAS score zeros back or forth? Which one do you think who do you think showed the most out, or who do you think benefited the most for having these scores?
Well, some guys that I'm not sure were very high on people's lists had some pretty awesome RAS scores. Now, does that mean they're going to get really push up draft boards? I'm not sure. Johnny Wilson out there at 6'7" had a 9.88 RAS because he ran a pretty fast time for his size. Cornelius Johnson, a guy who didn't get a lot of looks at Michigan, as obviously we talked about all the time, they don't throw the ball a lot. He had a 9.89. So both of those were pretty high for guys that people are like, are they NFL guys? Like, can they make it?
Is Johnny Wilson just because he's so big? Is that why it was such a good?
I think it helped his RAS, but I mean, he put up some good stuff. The question is whether people think he's going to be able to translate it to the NFL. Like, what is he as an NFL wide receiver? That's the interesting thing for me. I actually was a little surprised Devontae Walker actually put up better numbers than I thought he was going to.
Yeah,
I watched a lot of the Senior Bowl. He was one of the guys I was like, he didn't play that well at the Senior Bowl, but he actually put up some pretty good numbers. But again, it was hard to say because so many guys put up good numbers across the board as far as wide receivers. So that's what's tough. Even the guys that were on the lower end, you're like, well, I mean, he still ran a 4.49. You know what I mean? It wasn't like guys were like terrible. So it'll just be interesting if something jumps out at people. Keon Coleman was another one of those. People were like kind of down on his score. He still scored a 9.18 in RAS score, so he's still over 9, and people were like, well, he ran a 4.61, but then people were like, well, if you ever watch him, he's not really super straight line fast anyway. That wasn't his game. I mean, he did punt return in college, so it's not like he's slow. I mean, he did punt return, so it's just gonna be interesting to see what jumps out for some of these guys, on where they move up, move down. Troy Franklin, I don't think was bad by any means. I think he was about what we thought, but like, for some reason, I feel like he went from like the top of tier 2 for me to like the bottom of tier 2. I think a couple guys jumped in from him, and it was just maybe little things that I saw that I liked that other guys did better. But I just think we're going to see a ton of guys get drafted in the first 3-4 rounds in this draft. I mean, we're going to see some guys with some crazy good athletic RAS scores and combine numbers that don't even go till late just because there's so many of them. But it's a deep class, and it's definitely going to come down to what teams like, who they already have on their roster, and they say, hey, we've got an X, we really like this X, but we need a slot, or we need a Y, or Z. I mean, it really is going to depend on what teams like what guys, because I do feel like a lot of these guys are so close.
Yeah, it was every draft you were in before. You saw the Brian Thomas and Troy Franklin like neck and neck rankings. Now it seems like definitely Brian Thomas separated himself from Troy Franklin after the combine. So
and AD Mitchell from Texas is another one. He had the best RAS score, 9.98. He ran a 4.35. He only ran 140. He decided 4.35 was plenty good, and he didn't run another one. But he's another guy that people were like, well, did you see his interview? He said he never runs 100%. Like, he never runs route as hard as he can. And so it's like, are they going to knock him for that? Or are they going to say, oh, well, he's, saving himself so he can play at a high end most of the drive, as opposed to like burning himself out running 100% on every route. So I don't, how do teams take that? Some teams might not bother him at all. There might be other teams that are like, I don't know if I want a guy that admits that he doesn't play 100% all the time. So you just don't know how that works out. I mean, if you're going straight out of athletic score, I mean, AD Mitchell, 9.98, 4.35. You got to take him. But I've already heard people be like, he's still low on my list. I just don't love him as a wide receiver. I just don't know if he's going to be a great fantasy pro wide receiver consistently. So that's where you got to find that too. Yeah, some of these guys are going to be good. They're going to have highlight plays, but are they going to be consistently good for a long period of time in the NFL? I guess that's what we're all trying to figure out.
Yeah, Dave, you had mentioned before something, about Marvin Harrison, that Joe in there. Who else didn't show up or didn't participate in a lot of stuff that you kind of wanted to see this year?
Well, and I don't want to misspeak on anybody, but like I don't remember seeing Malachi Corley. And maybe I missed that, but
He was not there. I didn't see him either.
he was supposed to be, got an invite, and so like that was disappointing. And Justin and we're on the same page with a lot of the guys. A lot of the for me, you put them in tiers, and then they're kind of just clustered together. And then the combine, I'm not going to move somebody from tier 2 to tier 5 or 5 to 2, but I'm going to re-rank and reorder that cluster based on things. And same guys, Troy Flanken moved down, Brian Thomas moved up, like McConkey moved up. And so one guy, like I said earlier, I really like, he's becoming my guy. It's Bub Means. And you look at the RAS score was really good. And looking at him, I'm like, this guy just, I mean, personality was off the charts in the media. And then I'm like, okay, that guy's funny. He's cool, blah, blah, blah. Then I saw him on the field. I'm like, he's huge. He was just jacked. Yeah. And then he has a 9.74 RAS score. He looks really smooth in the drills. And so I was just really impressed. His vert was great. Showed a lot of burst. Had a 4.43 40. And he's a bigger guy. And so I was impressed by him. And for me, like I said, the people that didn't participate in everything, it's so hard because we're living in a different era. Yep. We have the NIL money. And so these guys, like, they don't have the same kind of leverage or the same kind of loss. Some of them are already millionaires before they even showed up to the NFL. We also have older prospects where we have COVID years kind of extended the college careers of some people. NIL extended the college careers. You got the transfer portal where people are moving all over the place. So it's definitely a different era. But yeah, as far as the people that did the drills, there was so many guys that looked good. And Adonai Mitchell, he was kind of iffy on the field drills. He had one like Willie Mays kind of catch would look awesome, but then like he fell down on the next route. And so he was a little inconsistent, but his 40 was great. And, he was someone that I think raised up people's rankings.
Yeah, how many guys, we talked about some running backs before, how many wide receivers weren't able to participate because of injuries? And are any of those going to be concerned come our rookie drafts or our dynasty for year one? Guys that might start in a pup or guys that might have any kind of, there's always guys with some heart ailments or some guys with something going on. Is there anybody to be concerned about in this draft class or no?
No one that I'm aware of. There was a couple guys that didn't work out because of different things, but all of them basically said they were going to be ready to go. I think the one guy had a stretch fracture or something in his leg. He's gonna be ready to go. And then back to the running backs, Jonathan Brooks said he'll be good July 1st. So, receiver wise, no one that I'm aware of.
Yeah, that's good. It's a clean slate of good players. This is fantastic. We're coming in with just great evaluations, get all these scores, get all these, this is such a good class, and to have them all coming in healthy in the NFL, it's like a wave of freshness coming in. It's so nice to see all these talented receivers big talented receivers come to the NFL too. So who really needed to kind of prove something by showing up at the combine and actually killing it when they were here?
For me, it's the Michigan guys. I know that Roman Wilson made a lot of noise the Senior Bowl, but you come from an offense in Houston that chucks the ball over the yard, and you got these video game kind of numbers, and everybody's got seeing all your highlights, and you were really featured. And then like Roman Wilson, you don't have all that production. You don't have a lot of that stuff. And so it's any of the guys that don't have a lot of production. Keon Coleman, you didn't see much from him until, he transferred. We talked earlier in regards to Leggett. Brian Thomas is similar, where like those guys had more later breakouts. And so like those guys, they needed to show where like guys like Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, they've got long resumes. Nobody has any questions about their game. But these other guys, you want to see that. And then, of course, the small school guys. The small school guys, seeing them next to the big school guys, that's where you can compare. Because the first thing you think about when this guy's got, Tank Dell's got all these gaudy numbers, and he's like, he didn't play anybody. and then you see him at the combine, and like he looks better than the other guys, and so like that's always fun to see, the comparison.
Who hurt themselves by going to the combine? JT, we'll start with you, I guess.
Like I said, I thought as a group was a great group. So I don't think a ton of guys hurt themselves. Did some guys look better than others? Like I said, Keon Coleman, the slow 40 time was the one that kind of glared for some people. He was another one. He was slipping and sliding a little bit in and out of cuts on drills. Troy Franklin, the biggest knock on him was the gauntlet. He was like swerving all over the place, and they want you to run straight line as fast as you can. And so then the people go, well, if you got a really good 40 time, but you can't run in a straight line, like when you're actually running your routes, is that an issue? Again, I don't think anybody killed themselves because I think there wasn't anywhere where just like glaring horrible performances. The small school guys, like Dave said, I think, you want to see them next to the other guys to see how they kind of compare. So I think like a Luke McCaffrey from Rice that played quarterback and wide receiver, for him to put up a pretty good 9.56 RAS score. He ran he actually ran faster than his brother at the combine. He ran a 4.47, where his brother ran a 4.48 in the 40. So I think that made a big difference. Shown that he can really play with those guys. I thought the two Washington wide receivers outside of Roma Dunze, they've had some injuries the last 2 years, each of them. I thought Polk and McMillan both ended up playing pretty well because we were like, hey, how much is them? How much is it the QB? You never kind of know when you're talking about those types of things. So I thought those guys were pretty good. And then I thought a guy like Malik Washington was on the other side of that. He played for a terrible college team, but he ended up putting up unbelievable college stats, but a lot of people didn't know about him or see him because he was on Virginia and they were just bad. So I was really interesting to see what he would look like in person next to some of these other guys. Because I was like, is he just a guy that had good college production, but is going to be like a 6th round pick? I actually thought he was really good. I thought he played really well. He kind of, when you see the highlights in college after watching him at the combine, I'm like, okay, those are legit. Like, he's not just like scoring against terrible teams. He is making things happen. So I actually thought Malik Washington was a guy that kind of was on people's radar, but how high was he rated? I think he maybe moved up a little bit after watching him at the combine. Dave?
Yeah. Again, it's small school guys. Like Anthony Gould was one that was interesting. I saw him as one of the top odds for the fastest 40, and I'm like, who's that? And I kept calling him the wrong name. I'm looking for him, and then I saw him, and one of the things I like to see is okay, well, how do they do in the route running? And I thought he was able to break in and out of routes very smoothly as far as acceleration. Where some of these guys where they they're really good speed guys, but they can't slow down and then speed back up, and you saw a lot of that with him. There was, again, so many guys. A guy that popped onto my list that I did not have before was Ryan Flournoy. I thought that there's I'm trying to think of the other guy, the guy that caught Joe Milton's catch from Mississippi State.
It was Griffin.
Yeah, and so like he was one that like. I didn't see him at all. I've never watched anything. I never heard anything of him. And then all of a sudden I'm watching the gauntlet, watching the different drills. And I'm like, who's that guy? Like, he's just quiet, doing his business, but he just looks so smooth, so quick. And then you saw it on that bomb where like, we joked around with Milton, like, hey, you're just going to like throw it into the stands. And he's like, well, I'm going to throw it far. The receiver better run. And so, the next guy was cowering, and he was a little bit short because Milton was throwing it so dang far.
Yeah, watching Joe Milton was awesome. We expected that, and it was fantastic to see it in emotion. You guys got to see so much this year, man. I'm so jealous, like I said, but it's I'll be there next year. Hopefully, it is what it is. But excuse me. Who do you think it's? I mean, obviously, we're going to play the game we played last one where there's no Marvin Harrison. Who gets drafted second in this draft?
For me, it's Neighbors. I love Dunze. I think he's up there, but I think Neighbors is clear cut number 2. I don't think there's any thought of him being the number 1, but if anyone were to be considered the number 1 other than Harrison, be him.
JT, you agree with that?
Yep, I'm in the same boat. Marvin
Yeah,
Harrison, one for me. Neighbors, number 2. I saw just a ton of both those guys this year. I watched most of their games, and they were just beasts all season. I think Dunze, the people that are like, oh, he's right there with him. I actually, after watching the combine, like I said, he's closer to those guys than I would have thought before. But I think he goes 3. But I also think whoever gets him as the third wide receiver is going to be pretty pumped that they got him as wide receiver 3.
Right. Who's the guy, Dave? Start with you. Who's the guy that you really like that you're probably going to go undrafted?
Oof, probably the guys that I've listed already. Like Bub Means, could be one. Jamari Thrash, Ryan Flournoy. Those guys. I believe you're going to see most of the other guys get drafted that I have above them. Cornelius Johnson is another interesting guy, and Taj Washington from USC.
If Johnny Wilson decides that he wants to stay a receiver instead of a tight end, instead of switching positions, do you think he'll get drafted?
I mean, if he's going to be that, like, he's not going to do it, then yes, maybe. Because at the end of the day, a team is not going to – I think a team is going to want a player that's willing to play other positions,
sure,
especially when you have so many good players. And he tested pretty well. But if you compared him – I posted it. If you compared him against the tight ends, if he ran with the tight ends, I mean, his numbers would have been stupid. It was like number 1, number 2, number 4, number 1, number 1. But you tested him against receivers. He's like number 25, number 25, number 26. He was the 4th in speed score, which is, just your 40 weight adjusted 40. He was 4th in speed score in the receivers, but he was 25th, 26th at the combine. And there's still other players that did not go to the combine, and Marvin Harrison Jr. So, I mean, he was like average. And so, against tight ends, he was top 2 in almost everything.
Yeah. I don't get it. Who was it? Was it Amon-Ra St. Brown that said he doesn't do any special teams? I don't play this. And, was it him or was it? It wasn't Equanimous, right? It was Amon-Ra that said that before. And it was kind of a big knock from him coming to the NFL. Like, you can't tell us what you're going to do or what's going on. And I mean, he ended up being great, but it's a rarity for guys to come in there and kind of tell the NFL what they're going to do and then actually pan out. So, you gotta be flexible, man. You got to do what they get. Be a team player. That's what they're looking for.
Yeah. So, I mean, last year I asked Elijah Higgins, I said, hey, the teams talk to you about how they're going to use you. And he's like, yeah, I'm moving to tight end. Like, he was just very honest about it. And he was just, and we asked Johnny Wilson the same question. He was like, I'm a receiver. Yeah. And people are going to say, I'm a receiver. And he was, I'm not running with tight ends. I'm running with the receivers. He was very adamant about it. And, maybe he changes his mind after the combine or after the interviews, because at the end of the day, the team that hires him is going to be, that's his boss, and he's going to have to figure that out soon.
He didn't seem very happy about getting asked that question. We talked about that earlier too, but yeah, I think he's pretty adamant about just staying a wide receiver, and that's not, whatever. It is what it is, man. So let's talk about real fast. I'll hit each one of you guys up. Pick some your favorite landing spots for these players. I'll start with you, Dave. Let's go with Marvin Harrison. Where do you really, really want to see Marvin Harrison go?
Yeah, I think where he's probably going, and that's the Cardinals. It's a great spot. Kyler Murray is there. That offense was a lot better than I think most of us expected them to be last year. He gets to go and be the alpha right off the bat, so he's going to get a lot of opportunity, a lot of targets, and gets a good young quarterback. I like that spot for him a lot.
JT?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see Marvin Harrison on the Bears if they would trade down and keep Fields, but it sounds like that's not going to happen. So I think the Cardinals seem like a really nice landing spot. If for some reason something gets crazy and everybody moves and he got to the Chargers, that would be phenomenal. I don't know if that happens, but I think, Chargers, Cardinals, Bears. I think all three of those would be pretty nice spots for him.
Same. What about Neighbors? Is Neighbors the Bears? Just kind of if everything stays the same and they do take number 1 pick, what number 9 do you think they're going to take Neighbors, Dave?
I don't think Neighbors is going to be there at 9. I have a hard time seeing him get past the Chargers. I know there's some Brock Bowers talk, and you think about Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman in the past and needing a tight end. It makes sense. Financially, it makes more sense to take the receiver. You're saving a whole lot more money by drafting a receiver than a tight end. You look at the franchise tag coming up on the, in the second contract. It's going to be a lot more expensive to, you're saving a lot more money with Malik Neighbors than Bowers. I also think that Neighbors is a difference maker. They missed on Quentin Johnston last year. We'll see if he does anything this year. I'm not a big fan, but Neighbors he's an amazing player. I think he goes there. If not, I don't think he gets past either the Giants or the Titans. And you could see someone even trade up. But I just don't think Neighbors is going to get out of the top 6, 7.
Yeah. So JT, that means Rome Odunze goes to the Bears, right?
Yeah, I think that he's going to be in the mix there. It'd be interesting to see what some of these teams are. They're wide out needy, but are they gonna pass on the top or second best O lineman when they need O line help? So that's where you're going to get to, does the Titans, if Neighbors goes to the Chargers, if the Titans take, one of these other guys, do they take a Dunze and then the Bears are out on a wide receiver there? Possibly. But there's a lot of guys that need need O line help. And I mean, I know the Bears want O-line or want wide receiver there, but if the Bears got one of the top 2 offensive linemen at 9, I think they would absolutely be ecstatic. And then they could turn around in the second round and draft a wide receiver in the second round. So I don't think it's a must-have at 9 to go wide out, but I do think a Dunze would be a great fit there if that's into being what they do and who gets to them at that spot.
I love that the Bears got plenty of money. They don't have to draft right now. If they can get a good offensive lineman, they get Joe Alt, and then in the second round or third round get a really good center. They're gonna miss on Jackson Powers probably, but let's just say they could really fix that team pretty fast, especially in free agency with a good expensive receiver because they have plenty of cap money, man. And the defense is shaping up. That team could be up and coming really good if they decide that's their plan. But I mean, we talked about Troy Franklin, Brian Thomas, those guys. We all want to see those guys, the fast, speedy receivers, go to the Bills or the Chiefs or some other spot like that with a great quarterback. But where's your favorite landing spot for one of the top, outside of the top 5 guys, to see somebody that you really like that's not going under the radar, but not in the top 2 tiers? What's your favorite landing spot for one of those other receivers? As a team, maybe in the second round, that kind of deal, Dave.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of different places where it really depends on the quarterback, because you have some of these quarterbacks that, like we said, the Jaguars and the Bills are 2 spots where we're gonna see it. I'm interested to see what the Bengals do with T. Higgins, because when you look at T. Higgins and you look at all the contract and all the financial implications, they say he's being franchise tagged. Is he going to be tagged and traded? If that happens, the Bengals become an ideal landing spot for all of these guys. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. They could just tag him and then get a compensatory pick next year, but they could possibly get a first-round pick for T. Higgins or a 2+ in this year's draft if they were to tag and trade Higgins to Carolina or one of these other needy teams. So when you're looking at I look at quarterbacks, and that's where I'm going to correlate my landing spots. So Arizona is a spot. I really like Jacksonville, Buffalo, obviously Kansas City, and the Chargers. If the Chargers don't get a receiver in the first round, they better go take an offensive lineman and then circle back and get a receiver in the second.
Yeah, JT, second, third round wide receiver, something like that. Later guy. Who do you want? One of your favorite sleepers to fall somewhere?
I mean, I like Xavier Legette. I guess I don't know why I really like him. I know people are going to be out on him because of, like I said, just a 5th-year breakout. But he's a guy I could see the Raiders falling in love with and taking him like in the second round, possibly. The Steelers need a slot wide receiver very badly, and depending on what ends up happening with Deontay Johnson after this year, they could end up all of a sudden looking like they had all these wideouts, and all of a sudden they could need a ton of wideouts. So I could see them grabbing somebody. I mean, if they got somebody like a Jacob Cowing in like the fourth round, I'd be ecstatic there. I think he would just be a nice mix in there with what Deontay and Pickens are doing. But yeah, I mean, Allen Robinson, while we loved him in the past, he is just not the guy anymore, man. He's just not fantasy relevant. He just wasn't very good for the Steelers. They need somebody else as a third wideout. And I know a lot of people are really hoping why am I blanking all of a sudden? Calvin Austin would kind of be that guy, but I'm not 100% sure the Steelers are sold on that Calvin Austin is any more than a gadget guy for them. So that I think that could be an interesting spot where some guys could see some targets, even though they're not the high end guy. Another place that'd be interesting, Houston. They got Nico, they got Tank, they've got some other young guys, but are they maybe looking for a wideout in here? In the Rams, you've got Cooper Kupp, you got Puka after last year, but man, beyond those guys, they were really thin. I mean, Demarcus Robinson ended up becoming playable. So do they go wide receiver? I could see them grabbing any number of these guys. Like I said, there's just such a deep group. There's so many guys that, depending on who they take, who I'd like, but I think Rams could be a decent landing spot for a number of these players. I mean, maybe a Jalen McMillan, maybe a Polk. Maybe they say, hey, we like these guys, but we're going to wait and see who gets to us in the third round. And maybe you go and grab a guy somewhere in that range. So I can see that happening too. But Polk's the guy I like. I'm really interested to see where he ends up at, because I think he's one of those guys that could be a pretty good NFL player.
Yeah. Dave, what do you think? What's your overall perspective about how the combine went compared to what you thought about the receivers coming out of college? What did you learn about the combine?
Yeah, and I was trying to scramble for some names earlier. Just a couple more would be Detroit. I really don't believe in Jamison Williams being like that outside receiver. I think they could use another guy outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. The Giants, I know it's a crappy quarterback spot right now, but you could see another quarterback go there. And then Tennessee, you have Hopkins, Burks, and Burks really hasn't stayed healthy. So that, and then of course Carolina. I mean, Carolina is going to run into a bunch of targets, and so like teams that have 2 or 3 already, it's hard for these guys to get some playing time. And all of those teams, those guys come in there and they're the 1 or the 2 almost immediately in all those spots. So as far as the combine. I thought it was great. I think that this receiver class in particular showed out. The running backs were a little slow. The receivers were, they gave you everything you wanted. Like Bucky Brooks talks about going to the, it's all about your flavor at the ice cream store. You got all the flavors. You got big receivers. You got, you have your fast receivers. You got tall, big, everything you're looking for. And like the big guys were fast. And so the NFL doesn't rank players like we do, where we're just linearly ranking them all straight down the line. They're ranking them in groups. These are my speed receivers. These are my X receivers. These are kind of the guys that can do it all. And so they're looking at it a little differently. And so if people are shopping for any particular player, there's kind of a surplus at receiver at, anything you're looking for. And that's what I thought was great. And these guys didn't impress. There really is hard. It's hard to find a guy that like, man, that guy really sucked at the combine. It's easy to say that guy was great, And so that's what I love about it.
So you heard it from Dave here, Bryce Young comeback tour.
I can see them taking a few wide receivers, like he said. I mean, you go in there, even if they say they'd even take a guy till the third round. I think it's kind of crazy, but we'll say they don't even take a wideout till the third round. That third round wideout could easily go in and be the number 1 for them and get a ton of target share. So, and it's going to be interesting to see how far some of these guys drop, where in other years they might have been second or early third round picks, so they maybe drop 4th or 5th round, because it's such a deep class. There's going to be some teams that are just going to wait. There's going to be like, hey, we like a lot of these guys. Hey, we only like one inside linebacker. We only like one safety. If that guy's there, they take him. If not, then they go, okay, then we'll move on to our group of wide receivers. So I think the other groups, position groups, are going to be interesting for that. I think this group, again, like Dave said, like, do you like the X guy? Do you need a slot guy? Maybe, and what's the difference there? Do you like this slot guy a ton more than the guy right below him? If so, then maybe you do take that guy a little higher. If they're pretty close, maybe you wait until that next draft pick and you say, yeah, we maybe we can get one of the two of them. But there's going to be a lot of guys, I think, that go fourth, fifth round this year that we're going to be still really wanting in our fantasy drafts.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Dave, thanks for your time today, man. This was great talking about wide receivers. That we were kind of pumped about this part of the show, so we're glad you were able to join us today. There's so deep. It's so much to talk about. And after the draft, we'll talk about this stuff again. A lot of things will change. The landing spots will be determined then, and we'll have a whole new group of a whole new show to talk about landing spots and why they're great. Who got screwed over? Who did great? So, but where can we find you at again, Dave?
At Dynasty Dorks, and you can go to sportsgamblingpodcast.com to catch my articles.
Yes, JT.
Yep, find me at JT Orange, my show, The Stew with JT Brew, and then also, just on all these shows with you. If you're into IDP, all that stuff, any rookie getting really fired up for rookies, you're a part of DLF. I write, I've got a bunch of rookie articles coming out for them, and my IDP rankings on there, as well being on Fantasy Frames here with you. I've got some IDP stuff coming up on Fantasy and Frames as well, so I'm going to be getting some of that rookie talk in too.
Woohoo! John McGlynn 75, Fantasy and Frames channel here. You can find my stuff on the Dynasty Evaluation YouTube channel. And guys, thanks a lot this is the last show today. You did a great job. Some awesome guests today. I really want to thank Dave for being here for the last one. So closing us out. Have a good one. We'll see you next week. See you tonight on a Fantasy and Frames draft, actually. All right. We'll talk to you later.